Good evening. I'm Clara Nightwell, and tonight I'm here with Rowan Hartsteele. Tonight we're staying with the life of a man whose words once carried an entire nation through darkness.
Winston Churchill is often remembered for his speeches during the Second World War. But those words did not emerge suddenly. They were shaped over a lifetime of doubt, isolation, and being ignored.
So this story begins long before the war.
Yes, it begins with a man who struggled to be heard, and who learned, slowly, what it meant to speak with conviction.
That kind of voice is rarely formed easily.
Tonight, we'll follow Churchill not as a symbol of victory, but as a human life shaped by persistence, responsibility, and a cost of standing firm.
Rowan, let's begin before history was ready to listen.
Winston Churchill's early life did not begin with confidence. It began with distance, the kind that is felt more than spoken.
Distance inside a family can be its own kind of loneliness.
His parents were prominent and busy. Affection was not absent, but it was scarce, irregular, and often replaced by expectation.
So, approval became something to earn.
Yes, young Winston grew up with a strong awareness that attention could disappear, praise could be delayed, and childhood could be spent waiting for a glance that did not always arrive.
That kind of waiting shapes a person.
At school, he struggled. Not because he lacked ability, but because his mind resisted routine. Discipline felt like confinement. Authority felt personal. And failure became public, early, and repeated.
So he was labeled before he could define himself.
Yes. Teachers saw him as difficult. Classmates saw him as odd. And inside that, Churchill began to develop something that would later become central to his life, a stubborn refusal to vanish.
A kind of inner defiance.
Exactly. When life does not offer you belonging, you begin to build a self out of will.
I didn't know that about him.
Many people don't. We tend to remember Churchill as a finished figure, a voice, a posture, a symbol. But before that, there was a boy trying to become someone worth noticing.
Did he find refuge anywhere?
He did, in words. He began reading deeply, memorizing, practicing expression. Language offered a kind of control that life did not.
As if he could shape the world, at least on the page.
Yes, and slowly he began to realize that speaking well could create presence. It could make people stop, listen, and pay attention.
So the voice began long before the podium.
Long before. It began in solitude, in the private practice of becoming visible.
And that makes everything that comes later feel less sudden and more earned.
As Churchill entered adulthood, his hunger for purpose intensified. He did not want a quiet life. He wanted meaning, recognition, and proof that his existence mattered.
That kind of desire can be powerful and dangerous.
Yes. Churchill sought action wherever it could be found. He volunteered for conflict, wrote passionately, and placed himself constantly in situations where failure was visible.
Almost as if invisibility frightened him more than defeat.
Exactly. His early career was marked by ambition that often outpaced patience. Success came briefly, then collapsed.
And when collapse happens publicly,
it becomes a reputation. Churchill's involvement in failed policies, especially during the First World War, followed him relentlessly.
So mistakes stopped being moments. They became identity.
Yes. For years, he was seen as impulsive, unreliable, theatrical, a man who spoke too loudly and acted too soon.
That kind of judgment is hard to escape.
It is. His career slowed. Influence faded. Invitations stopped coming.
What did he do during that silence?
He wrote. He painted. He reflected. These years, though painful, taught him endurance without recognition.
Learning to continue, even when no one was watching.
During the years that followed, Churchill found himself increasingly isolated. He remained in Parliament, but his voice carried little weight.
To be present, yet unheard.
Yes, he spoke often, warning of dangers forming across Europe, but the mood of the time resisted him.
People wanted peace more than truth.
After the trauma of the First World War, denial felt merciful. Confrontation felt cruel.
So his warnings sounded disruptive.
As Hitler rose to power, Churchill watched closely. He studied speeches, military movements, ideology, sensing danger long before it became undeniable.
And still, no one listened.
Not at first. He was labeled alarmist, dramatic, obsessed with conflict.
That must have felt deeply discouraging.
It did. Yet he continued, not because he expected applause, but because silence felt irresponsible.
So speaking became duty.
Yes, these were the loneliest years of his political life, years spent preparing for a future he hoped would never arrive.
Waiting while the storm gathered.
In 1940, the world Churchill had been warning about arrived. The collapse he had imagined was no longer theoretical. It was visible on maps, in headlines, and in the faces of exhausted leaders.
So the moment he feared became real.
Yes. One by one, countries fell. The speed of it stunned Europe. And suddenly, Britain stood in a position it had tried to avoid, facing the possibility of standing alone.
That kind of loneliness must have felt terrifying.
It did. The government wavered. Options narrowed. People wanted reassurance, but reassurance was no longer honest.
And that's when Churchill becomes necessary.
Yes. The man once dismissed as alarmist was asked to lead, not because he promised comfort, but because he could face reality without flinching.
I didn't realize how much of leadership is simply endurance.
Endurance and language. Churchill understood the psychological landscape of a nation under threat. He knew that panic spreads faster than truth, unless truth is spoken with steadiness.
So his speeches weren't decoration.
No. They were architecture. He built mental shelter with words, not by promising easy victory, but by naming the cost clearly.
Blood, toil, tears, and sweat.
Yes. It was not a slogan. It was permission to be afraid, without surrendering.
So the man who spent years speaking into silence suddenly became the voice everyone needed.
As the war continued, the weight of leadership pressed down relentlessly. There were no pauses, no safe moments, no certainty that tomorrow would hold.
Holding that much responsibility must change a person.
It does. Churchill lived with constant urgency. Decisions carried lives within them. Each choice risked irreversible loss.
There's no way to set that burden down.
No. Even rest became strategic. Sleep was fragmented. Thoughts returned endlessly to what could go wrong.
And beneath all of it, the black dog.
Yes, depression had accompanied Churchill long before the war. During those years, it deepened, not as weakness, but as exhaustion of the spirit.
I didn't know he spoke about it so openly.
He did, privately. He understood it as something that arrived uninvited, something to be endured rather than defeated.
So strength wasn't the absence of darkness.
No, strength was continuing despite it. Painting, writing, and routine became anchors, small islands of stability.
Ways to stay human.
Exactly. The war demanded a public figure of resolve, but behind that image was a man surviving one day at a time.
So even leadership became an act of endurance.
When the war finally ended, celebration filled the streets. The danger had passed. The country could breathe again.
After so much darkness, relief must have been overwhelming.
It was. And with relief came change. Britain looked toward rebuilding, toward homes, welfare, stability, and peace.
A different kind of future.
Yes, and in that shift, something unexpected happened. In the first election after the war, Churchill was voted out of office.
After everything he had carried.
It was not rejection of the man, but recognition of a moment passing. The leader of survival was not the same as the architect of recovery.
That feels deeply human and deeply painful.
Churchill understood this more than most. Some people are shaped by crisis. Their purpose appears when the world fractures.
And when the fracture heals, they're no longer needed.
Yes. In later years, he turned again to writing, memory, and reflection, attempting to place meaning around what had been endured.
Trying to understand his own life.
He lived long enough to see himself become history, studied, quoted, simplified.
History rarely keeps the whole person.
No, it remembers moments, not nights, decisions, not doubts.
So perhaps his legacy isn't victory, but endurance.
Endurance, and the courage to stand when collapse seemed inevitable.
Before we close tonight, I'd like to invite Margaret to join us for a quiet moment. Margaret, for those who stayed with Churchill's story, where might you gently guide them next?
Thank you, Clara. Churchill is one of those lives where books don't simply recount events. They help us sit with the weight he carried. A beautiful place to begin is Churchill, Walking with Destiny by Andrew Roberts. It follows his entire life, showing how long the road was before the moment history finally needed him.
So it helps us understand that he didn't appear suddenly.
Exactly. And for readers who want to feel closer to the man himself, The Last Lion offers a deeply human portrait, full of doubt, ambition, and endurance.
To see how much of his life unfolded before the world noticed.
Yes. And finally, My Early Life, written by Churchill himself, is surprisingly gentle. It reveals humor, vulnerability, and a man still trying to understand his own beginnings.
3 different ways of staying with him a little longer.
Sometimes, that's all a story asks of us.
Thank you, Margaret. That was a gentle place to pause tonight.
Thank you, Clara. It was a pleasure, as always.
As we sit with his story, I keep thinking about how some lives are not built for calm times.
Yes, some people don't arrive to bring comfort. They arrive to hold the world together when it begins to fracture.
And when the fracture heals, their place becomes uncertain.
Exactly. Churchill's life reminds us that usefulness and belonging are not the same thing.
That must leave a strange silence afterward.
It does. But perhaps meaning is not found in permanence, only in presence when it matters most.
So his life doesn't ask us to admire him.
No. It asks us to consider what responsibility feels like when no one else is ready to carry it.
And to remember that endurance is not always loud.
Sometimes it simply stays.
Rowan, thank you for walking through this life with such care tonight.
Thank you, Clara. Some stories don't end. They simply rest.
If this conversation stayed with you, you're welcome to like, comment, and subscribe. There are other voices here waiting quietly, stories about memory, endurance, and the human weight of history. Until next time, stay with us.